Hello and welcome back to the Done Deal YouTube channel, and behind me we have Peugeot's fastest ever production car. This is the most power they've put in any car for sale ever, and on top of that it is gorgeous. That is, in my opinion, one of the best looking cars I've seen in the last few years. Never mind a Peugeot. Now in this review we're going to be checking it out, talking about what it's like to drive, practicality and of course pricing. But if you would like to search for Peugeots for sale in Ireland, then make sure to hit the link over there. We've got over 1,000 trusted dealerships nationwide, and subscribe whilst you're at it. Now let's get into the review. Now in terms of design, as I said, it's one of my favourite cars. Now this is the standard colour. It's called Selenium Grey. It's very similar to a Nardo Grey that you'd see in the Volkswagen group. And then in terms of how it actually looks, so it's got the fang hanging down here. I actually think the front looks really aggressive. Then as you go along the side, 20-inch alloys, and they're wrapped in Michelin Pilot Sport 4S's, which, as we all know, are one of the best tyres you can get for a road car. Around the side, I think the biggest thing you'll notice are these side skirts. The aero is incredible, and it just makes it look that little bit more special, and that aero continues here with some side spats. Now there's also a diffuser on this, but what I do want to talk about is this particular one is the fastback, which means it's essentially kind of like a saloony coupe looking version. There is also an estate, it's called the SW. Personally, I think that one is the one to go for, because it just, there's something about a fast estate that is really cool. But whichever one you choose will definitely keep you happy. They look really well, and as I said, in terms of styling with all the little aero bits, I give it a genuine 10 out of 10. The ordinary Peugeot 508 can be got with a 1.2 litre petrol and a 1.5 litre diesel, both of which you can get in automatic or manual. There's also a plug-in hybrid which has 225 horsepower. That's a lot of brake horsepower. However, then there's this, the PSE, which stands for Peugeot Sport Engineered. And under here, we've got a 1.6 litre petrol engine. It's turbocharged, 200 horsepower from that. But it's also got two electric motors, one here and one at the rear. And that means A, it's four-wheel drive, and B, it's got 355 brake horsepower. That's a lot of power. Now for this particular one, I'm going to play a little game, and I'm going to say, have a guess in the comments right now how much you think it is. And a small little tip. Write in your comment. So this one is 70,000 euros. Don't worry though, the ordinary one can be got from about 40,000 euros, which rivals a lot of the competitors, and as far as they go, they come well kitted. You can obviously spec whatever different trim level you want, and they are very comfortable to drive. Now in terms of boot space, the SW, the estate, that has 530 litres. The fastback, mind you, this doesn't open so fast. This has 437 litres, which is still actually quite sufficient. Now, in this one, you can see I've got some charging cables. The beauty of this being a plug-in hybrid is the reality is you'll always charge at home, and you won't really have these in the boot. In terms of other features, there's a 12-volt socket, and the seats do fold down. However, you do have to come around here to do it. Other than that, it is very practical. It's a nice shape, and actually because it's the fastback, it does open quite well. So it's not quite like a saloon where it cuts off here, meaning it's a bit bigger than something like a BMW 3 Series. In terms of rear space, well, most importantly, there are two ISOFIX points either side, and they're nice and easily accessible behind the zips. However, when your babies grow up, it's quite tight to get into, and actually when you sit in, there's very limited headroom. The good news is there's some USB charging points which will keep the kids happy, a little bit of storage there, and you can pop down the armrest and put 2 drinks there. But as a whole, it's not massive back here. So in the cockpit, again, it's quite low to get into. And someone young and hip like me has no problems, but maybe someone who can afford this might find that a little bit tricky to get in and out of. But in here, it is very much flagship Peugeot. So, well, where do we start? We'll begin with the boring stuff, the storage. So you have a little bit of storage in there. It's actually quite deep. glove box isn't gigantic. There is some charging points under here, both USB but also wireless, which is quite cool, and a little bit more storage in there. Now, in terms of when you push the start button and turn it on, well, it's got Peugeot's tiny steering wheel. You definitely feel like you're in an F1 car, flappy paddles behind it. So you've got the iCockpit up here, which is completely customizable and 3D. It's very, very cool. Difficult to show on camera, but my advice would be go down to your local dealer, take any modern Peugeot for a test drive, and you'll be very, very impressed by that. And then over here you've got, again, another big screen. Now, it's fully touchscreen, but I do like that there's some shortcuts on these piano keys. So for example, you can check out your vehicle, or this one over here on the right actually brings you to the electric, or kind of the efficiency modes, and you can go into e-save mode and make sure that you always leave 10% or 10 kilometer range in your electric motor. Now, where that becomes handy is if you live outside the city but you're going to be driving in the city, you can save all your electric power to when you get in there, so it's super efficient. That's completely up to you. And as a whole, it's quite nice. One small bone to pick is fake carbon fibre here, or else carbon fibre's got kind of spongy, one or the other. But in a 70,000 euro car, I want real carbon fibre, or just a completely different, maybe piano black finish. But as a whole, it is lovely. But I could talk all day about what it's like in here, but I think it's better to just go for a test drive. So to drive, you just pull it into gear and off you go. And it feels very nice, very, very solid. In fact, on the way up here, we were discussing it, and I think it feels a little bit like a DS, which is a great compliment to it. Now, in terms of driving aids, well, it's got it all. Reversing cameras, 360 cameras. Then it's actually got accident avoidance, emergency braking. It's also got adaptive cruise control. And then on top of that, it has a really good kind of autonomous driving where it really keeps you in your lane magnificently. It's really, really good on a country, or on a motorway drive. Then you've got a load of different modes. So we change, and you've got everything from electric to comfort to hybrid to sport to four-wheel drive. Now, I'll put it in sport for now, and actually it's got adaptive suspension, so it'll be a little bit stiffer now. The dampening isn't quite so soft, and we'll put our foot down. And you have to have battery in it to get the full 355 brake horsepower, so that's why it's important to keep some electric range in there. Now, in terms of power, well, obviously it's quite a heavy car, it's a big car, so I would say it doesn't feel like the fastest 355 brake horsepower car, but it does feel about 300, and that's a lot of power, even by today's electric standards. And what's more is, with the tight little steering wheel, it's very, very good in the bends. The brakes are big. When you get on them, it really does slow down. Now, another thing to talk about is actually the regenerative braking. So if you put it into B mode here on the throttle, when you take your foot off the accelerator, it begins to slowly slow that down. And what that does is it recoups energy and effectively increases your electric range, making it more efficient. And these are all key. Now, that's not the only way to charge the battery. You can actually charge it at home. It depends how you do it. If you've got a wall charger, you can do it in under 3 hours, I think. If you don't, if it's a 3-pin socket, 7 hours, which is plenty. You probably don't actually need a wall socket with this. Your range is just over 40 kilometers WLTP, which is respectable, particularly if you've got a short commute, maybe dropping the kids to school. You can actually do it purely on electric. And as a whole, to drive, it feels really, really well. I quite like the small steering wheel. It's actually also quite a nice shape. It sits in your hands lovely, feels good. The paddles, gonna be truthfully honest, they're somewhat irrelevant. They don't really do what you want. If I downshift, it takes nearly a full second, which is quite a lag in the 8-speed gearbox. The only other thing I'm not a massive fan of, and I've actually said this, I think in a Peugeot 2008 review, is that you've got to go around here, and if you see how much that's taking my eyes off the road to set the cruise control. Now, granted, after you do it 2 or 3 times, you know what button to press, but it's just something to bear in mind. Now, in terms of good things, as I said, you can run it purely on electric, and what that means is you can get up to 2 litres per 100 kilometres in terms of fuel efficiency, and that's just next level. Now, granted, it won't do that on the motorway, but in the city, it can be very, very efficient. That's a good thing. But we have to dwell on the amount of power in a Peugeot. This thing is pretty rapid, to be fair to it, and actually to drive, it's still got a little bit of its old GTI heritage. It does feel very, very nimble. Now, noise-wise, it's not massive. You probably heard it there. It is also increased by these speakers when you're in sport mode. But now in the modern world with hybrids, it's not about the noise. It's just about getting there subtly. So what is the verdict? Well, to be fair to Peugeot, they've created an absolutely cracking car. It is gorgeous to look at. It's very, very quick, and it is very, very, very comfortable too. The only thing that does slightly concern me is the mass of Peugeots are kind of 35,000 euro cars, if not less. And to create a car at about 70,000 euros and to compete against some of those class leader German cars, I just wonder who's going to be brave enough to buy one, although no doubt a few people will. And I have to say, when I was driving this, it turned more heads than any BMW 3 Series or 5 Series or Audi. People have to double take and go, wow, that's gorgeous. Is that actually a Peugeot? And so for that, I commend Peugeot. Now, I hope you've enjoyed this review. I hope you've learned something from it. If you have, please make sure to subscribe. And if you'd like to search for new Peugeots for sale in Ireland, hit the link up there. We've got over 1,000 trusted dealerships nationwide. Now, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.